Moon Studios CEO Thomas Mahler, who is developing the game No Rest for the Wicked, issued a lengthy defense of gamers who are opposed to woke ideology while rebuking journalist Maurice Weber of German outlet GameStar. Before we get to this, I'd like to ask you, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at the Trent Report. Wrote this up over at thatparkplace.com this morning. And let's kind of get into this here. Mahler took to X on May 13th, where he detailed he was contacted by Weber for an article that will likely be published in the German outlet GameStar. This is what Mahler wrote. I already know I might get myself into trouble once again by posting this, but I just replied to Maurice Weber, a German journalist who's affiliated with the German outlet GameStar. I do think it's especially important these days that we always remind ourselves to try to keep an open mind and try to understand even those who think differently than we do. He then shared a response he sent to Weber regarding people who are apparently fed up by woke culture. This is what he wrote. I think it all makes sense, Maurice. This is basically a backlash against cancel culture and similar phenomena because everyone has had enough of that nonsense. I suggest you take a more nuanced view, especially since you position yourself as a journalist. Yet you often display a narrow-minded attitude and don't seem to question what's actually going on. And that is something we should expect from a journalist. Just because you personally haven't been affected by cancel culture doesn't mean there hasn't been a lot of foolishness happening, and it's still ongoing. Indeed, it's not just in video games. Obviously, Gina Carano is suing Lucasfilm for firing her after she was mobbed for probably more than a year on social media by people trying to get her fired. And we just saw what happened with Cabrutus Rambo, Brazilian gamer, after he started his Sweet Baby Inc. detected Steam curator list. We saw Chris Kindred and Maya Kramer, Sweet Baby Inc. employees, trying to cancel him, cancel the Steam curator list. And then they played Woe Is Me, that they were the victims after they tried to cancel him. So we're seeing this happening quite often here. Mahler goes on, though, and says, and it's only a matter of time before it impacts you, too. He then shared famous words from Pastor Martin Niemöller. Mahler wrote this: consider this famous statement. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Instead of allowing artists to just be artists, Hollywood and most of the game developers on the West Coast have decided that it's appropriate to use films and video games as platforms to push their own political agenda. If you argue otherwise, I would expect a journalist like you to back it up with thorough research. You really can't argue it. It's very obvious. I mean, I document this with the Walt Disney Company, but it's pretty much everywhere. I mean, the Walt Disney Company obviously is the most obvious. They continue to say, "Oh, we're not actually engaging in the culture war," and then they push another transgender Star Wars character, or now recently they're pushing Doctor Who with all kinds of degenerate commentary and political agenda in it. I mean, it's absolutely just sickening. And you see it all over the place. Obviously, Warner Brothers paid a hefty price, $200 million, for pushing it in their Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League. People are fed up with it, but these companies are going to continue to do it despite the losses. I mean, just look at the Walt Disney Company. They continue to push this stuff over and over and over again, despite them racking up massive, massive losses at the box office. It's clearly for a political agenda. And I actually argue it's probably a little bit more sinister than that. I think it's a spiritual agenda. They want to actually destroy you spiritually, not just politically. Nevertheless, Mahler goes on and says, moreover, it's become the norm to point fingers at others, particularly at those who may think differently from us. Rather than allowing others to be different and listening to them regardless, we attack them outright. It's frankly eerily reminiscent of old Nazi tactics. Anyone who doesn't conform is ridiculed, and it suggested they be shamed, fired, and have their careers destroyed. I just mentioned Gina Carano. That's exactly what they did to her. This has been the approach over the past few years, and I know plenty of people whose careers have been devastated by trivialities and misinformation, and they continue to suffer today. You seem unaffected, and thus you refuse to consider a more open perspective. Mahler then stated, your apparent lack of empathy in this matter is not only unhelpful, but also shows a considerable amount of ignorance. Allow me to also play critic for a moment. At GameStar, you do the same thing. Instead of cleaning your own house, you wield the we report and earn from our articles. But beware, those guys are the real villains narrative, just to ensure the spotlight never falls on you, aligning yourselves just so. That's precisely why we've cut you off. We find such morally dubious practices unacceptable and refuse to support them. So that's really good on Mahler. I actually suggest that other game studios cut off many of these morally dubious outlets. Obviously, he's calling GameStar that, but I think we can point to other ones here in the United States, such as Kotaku, IGN. I think that game studios should not work with those outlets whatsoever, because those outlets are kind of part of that movement. They push this woke ideology to try and destroy you, not only politically, but as I said, spiritually. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. And I think that Mahler has a really good statement here. And I think other game studios should follow his and Moon Studios' example by cutting off these outlets and not working with them. Because at the end of the day, they don't actually speak the truth. I mean, we saw that with Kotaku and Farm Folks. The Farm Folks CEO was accusing Alyssa Mercanti of intentionally misrepresenting what he was trying to say. Got to learn from that. Mahler continues saying, you lack the initiative to conduct your own journalistic investigations, as it seems too much work when the next clickbait article is due the next day. Sad thing is that young journalists like yourself never knew anything else. The more outrage you generate, the more clicks you get, and that's how you make your living at the expense of others, which apparently doesn't matter as long as you're seen as the good guys. Yeah, I think that is probably true. I don't care whether or not I'm seen as the good guys or not. I care about whether I am on the side of truth, and I think that is the difference between me and a lot of these other people, like people like this Maurice Weber, people like Alyssa Mercanti. I will always try to side on the side of truth. That's what I aim to do. I do not want to. I don't care whether I'm seen as a good guy or a bad guy. Mahler then concluded his message to Weber, writing this: I hope in the future you will approach the world with more skepticism and openness and truly consider both sides instead of aligning yourself with one to amplify their propaganda. So this is probably where I probably a little bit differ from what Mahler says here. He wants to give both sides kind of their proper due. And I think that, I mean, sure, you can look at both sides and see, but I think at the end of the day, there is a battle here between good and evil. And one side is clearly pushing evil and one side is clearly pushing what is true, just, and right, and what is good. And so I think that there is, it's a little bit ridiculous to claim that you need to give both sides their due. I just don't believe in that. I don't think that you should be giving evil its due. That just doesn't really make any sense. You shouldn't be compromising with evil. You should be rejecting it. You should be condemning it, and you should be opposing it. That's just kind of where I probably disagree with this kind of like, you can be in the middle. Well, there is no real middle between good and evil. So after he shared that response to Weber, or his response to Weber, Maurice Weber, he added this: it is deeply, deeply important after everything that happened over the past couple of years that we always question hidden agendas, always try to be loving and show understanding even to those we vehemently disagree with. Proper discourse is more important than ever, and journalists need to understand their responsibilities in all this and start acting like journalists. Again, I 100% agree. I especially agree about the hidden agendas. I don't think that you're usually up to any kind of good if you're hiding in the shadows. if you're trying to hide and have these kind of hidden agendas, you're usually probably up to no good. Whereas probably if you're doing stuff in the light, you're probably fine with people seeing what you're doing, and it's probably something that is moral, just, true, and right. Now, that's not to say that can't be the case. Obviously, people can tell big lies out in public, and a lot of people will buy into it. But that's why we have, like as he says here, we have to be more skeptical. We have to question, and have to have proper discourse. So that is what he had to say there. I will say that I think this guy has been saying a lot of good things recently. He fired this consultant, Alexander Brazzi, who attempted to justify DEI hiring practices. Brazzi wrote this on X last month, just about a little bit over a month ago. He said, yeah, it would help if people understood effective DEI is about helping people who historically didn't have the network to get eyes onto their work have a chance due to their equal skill. The whole merit smearing is so banal, presumptuous, and out of touch with the reality. Absolutely not true. The whole point of DEI is the fact that you are hiring people based on immutable attributes over anything else. So the idea that you can criticize it based on the fact that they're not hiring the best people is accurate, given the fact that they're only hiring people based on their race, based on their sex, based on their sexuality, etc. So clearly trying to justify DEI here, but doesn't really make any sense. And Mahler actually responded to my coverage of this on here on YouTube when I just initially covered Brazzi, because he has listed in his Twitter bio that he was a designer for No Rest for the Wicked. And Mahler said this person is not affiliated with Moon Studios in any way whatsoever anymore. We contracted him for a short stint, and he was fired for bringing nothing but friction into our team, just for your information. So we fired this guy. Unclear what that friction was. Obviously, if he's promoting kind of this woke ideology through DEI, you can only imagine what kind of friction he was bringing. But it might have been more than that. But it also looks like he might have been actually incompetent, which goes on the fact that makes his whole like merit smearing thing even more hilarious, right? The guy was fired because he didn't bring anything to the team. And then in March, at the height of the backlash against video game consultant Sweet Baby Inc., Mahler also indicated that his company does not, quote, really hire consultants. Obviously, he did hire this guy, Alexander Brazzi, who runs a consulting firm. It's called like Adamek Consulting. So he did hire him for a brief stint, obviously fired him, but he did say that this year, back in March, the height of the Sweet Baby Inc. backlash, saying, we don't really hire consultants, so pardon me if I'm ignoring all your messages. I pretty much agree with what Steve Jobs had to say about consulting. And I know I'll get some hate for this, but it is what it is. And then goes on, basically, the video is basically Steve Jobs saying that consulting are basically the first people who will get fired when things go south, and that they really don't have any kind of skin in the game, because when things do go south, they can just move on to the next thing. And they're all about kind of like collecting trophies, saying that they worked on all these things and kind of just like building up their own ego, their own resume, when maybe they haven't really done a lot of work to get the final product to where it's actually at. So you can listen to that here. I'll have the link in the description below. So that is what Thomas Mahler had to say. You can purchase No Rest for the Wicked. I think it's around $40 on Steam. Went into early access on April 18th. It's described as an action RPG, and it is set to reinvent the genre. Early access to the game includes the first chapter of the game's narrative campaign, daily and weekly bounties and challenges, an assortment of quests, boss battles, a variety of weapons and armor, as well as a replayable dungeon, and the purchasing and furnishing of a home. I always liked that when I played MMOs, like Dark Age of Camelot. You could actually, they introduced a whole like home system. I always liked that. Thought that was really cool when you could do that. You can make your own home, furnish it with kind of like trophies and things that you got from playing the game. The game is expected to include 4-player co-op multiplayer, an expanded story, more maps, farming, as well as more bosses, weapons, armor, items, bounties, and challenges. So it looks like they got a lot planned as they continue to develop it in early access. So might be worth supporting this guy. He's clearly calling this stuff out. He's clearly calling game journalists out. He's defending gamers who are opposed to this woke ideology, opposed to cancel culture. So I really like what he's saying here. I wanted to share that with you. Obviously, I agree with much of what he's saying. I did talk about a little bit of the things that I do disagree with. But let me know what you guys make of what Thomas Mahler had to say here. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable to each other, but to always speak the truth.